Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Science in the News lecture, and so I'm going to minimize myself again. So I'm going to pull up the Science in the News PowerPoint, and I'm kind of going to flow through it. I'll try to note when I'm going through from slide to slide, but for this particular PowerPoint, the presentation is less important as me talking to you. So definitely have both up, but just know that I may not always remember to tell you when to switch slides. Okay, so the purpose of this class obviously is to teach you about research methods, teach you about good design, help you identify some of the potential issues, but most of the time researchers do an okay job. Most. There are certainly cases where that's not the truth, and honestly I have a whole class, a senior capstone class just about essentially critical thinking and research malpractice and all the problems in psychology, but that's not the purpose of this class here. So the purpose of the class here is to teach you the foundations of research methods and to help you think critically about research. And so one thing that I've been implementing is the teaching of criticizing and critically thinking about how science or science reporting is presented in the news and print media and newspapers, not that anyone reads those anymore, but online, right? And so we're going to go through kind of what is happening, maybe what are some of the distortions, and then your assignment will be to read a news article, then find the original journal article and kind of compare them. I know that time is running out and all of you are kind of stressed, and so I also provided you with a news article and a journal article that if you want to use that one, you may. Okay, so slide 2. So can science reporting essentially be trusted? And so you may have seen these kinds of things that pop up on Facebook or on websites, the root cause of obesity, avoid these 4 toxic foods, or the Green Office may boost your brain power, or the root cause of obesity, the World Health Organization confirms eating meat causes cancer, but how did this once healthy food become so deadly? Just meat in general, by the way, not like classified into multiple types of, like beef, poultry, pork, just all meat causes cancer. And of course, it was once healthy, and now it's deadly. So we're going to actually focus on that particular headline because they really hammered it home, and I, as a meat lover, really kind of like, what does this mean? What's happening? Because literally within an hour of this headline coming out, it was everywhere, where bacon, hot dogs, and processed meat causes cancer. The World Health Organization says processed meat is equal to smoking. I'm on slide 3, sorry. Processed meats do cause cancer. It's official. Bacon, hot dogs, and other processed meat cause cancers. Hamburgers probably do too, according to World Health Organization. So, and then on slide 4, you'll see that, of course, it instantly became memes on both Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook. It's official, bacon and sausage cause cancer and are as dangerous as cigarettes. How bacon kills, 1, 2, 3, right? Pinpointing certain parts of the bacon, which is not how that works. Of course, PETA, at least they were witty, bacon-wrapped cancer, right? You got to give them props for that. So, slide 5, and so I, as a meat lover, and especially as someone who started eating bacon later on in my life, I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, and so I wasn't not allowed to eat pork, and so I never had bacon. And then as an adult, when I stopped being religious, I ate bacon for the first time, and I'm like, oh my god, this stuff is amazing. And I kind of binged, and then I was like, oh, am I going to get cancer? Is this God's way of punishing me for eating bacon? And so I was really concerned about this headline. And so what I did is what most psychological scientists or scientists do, and I found the original journal article. And so the original journal article is published in The Lancet, which is a premier medical journal in Europe. It's the equivalent to Science, more or less, here in the US. And so what this journal found was, I'm on slide 5, by the way, what this journal found, the study found, was a relationship between processed red meat and bowel cancer. Processed red meat and bowel cancer. And all they did was study the relationship. And so if you know a little bit about association claims and causal claims, right, when we're talking about stating a relationship between these two things, what we're really talking about is an association claim. And so their conclusion was that eating red meat, processed red meat, is associated with a 17% increased risk of developing bowel cancer. Not all cancer, bowel cancer. I was a little surprised because I didn't know bowel cancer was a thing. Maybe I should have, but I didn't. And every time I present this to my students, I'm like, how many of you have even heard of bowel cancer? And like one person raises their hand, right? It's a very specific, rare type of of cancer. But nonetheless, eating red meat is associated with an increased chance by 17% of developing this cancer, so that's not a good thing. Let's break it down. Slide 6. So let's talk about the average baseline rate of bowel cancer. So in the UK, where this study was conducted, the average rate of bowel cancer is 61 in 1,000 people. So 61 in 1,000 people, regardless of anything else, have bowel cancer. So you have, on average, a 6.1% chance of having bowel cancer if you live in the UK. An increase in 17% means that for people who consistently eat processed red meat, have a rate of 66 out of 1,000. That's a 6.6% chance of having bowel cancer in the population. So the effective increase, the likelihood of bowel cancer increases at an actual rate of 0.5%. So that sounds significantly less scary. Slide 7. But let's break it down even more, because this study actually did a really good job. It looked at not just the average bowel cancer and then what happens if you eat high processed red meat, but they also examined those that eat low processed red meat diets. And so if you put through all the for the slides, so you see all of it. So you'll see that the average person, right, regardless of whether they eat a low or high processed meat diet, has a 6.1% chance of getting bowel cancer. If you eat a high processed meat diet, you have a 6.6%, right, 0.5% increase, which is still okay. It's something, but definitely not as scary as 17%. And then you have a low processed meat diet, and they have an average rate of 5.6%. So even if you compare low processed meat diet eaters and high processed meat diet eaters, the only difference is an effective rate of 1% of greater risk across the population. And people who don't eat a processed meat, don't eat lots of processed meat, get this type of cancer regardless, right? So it's not that there's something about the meat that's causing the cancer. Also, and this journal specifically states this, no one took into account the rest of your diet, right? So maybe you eat a really low processed meat diet, but you eat Skittles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Or maybe you eat, you drink 18 of those Monster energy drinks per day, which, by the way, those are really bad for you, right? Maybe the rest of your diet is awful, but you don't eat processed meat. Maybe you're a vegetarian. So one of my best friends actually is a vegetarian, and I wouldn't say that she eats very well, right? She eats lots of pizza. Pizza's not healthy. I know the U.S. government counts it as a vegetable, but it's not, right? So the rest of your diet is not accounted for in this study, whether you exercise or not, which we know is really key for cancer rates, whether you have any other family history of cancer, any cancer, aka genetics. It does not take into account the genetic predisposition of having bowel cancer or any other type of cancer, or the occurrence of other cancers. because there's lots of research that shows that having any other type of cancer increases your chance of getting a different cancer in the future. So that doesn't sound so scary, right? I want to note here, the study didn't do anything wrong. They studied the association, they studied the correlation between different levels of processed meat diets and the occurrence of bowel cancer. And they did a really good study. But the problem here is that all of the news agencies and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest and every news media out there, even reputable ones, took this headline and ran with it and made statements about causality when causality didn't actually exist. So slide 8. So let's talk about, so I'm going to go through the next few slides rather quickly because it talks about the process of science, okay? So on slide 8, a circle, nothing in it, right? So imagine that this circle contains all of the human knowledge that exists ever, anywhere, okay? Slide 9. By the time you finish elementary school, you know that much. You know a little bit, this tiny amount of overall human knowledge. Going on to the next slide. When you finish high school, you know a little bit more. That's the green circle. That's expanding overall knowledge. By the time you finish your bachelor's degree, you have expanded your overall knowledge, but you've also gained a specialty. So that tiny little pimple-looking thing is your specialty. So if you're an engineering major, that specialty is about engineering information. If you're a psych major, that specialty is about psychology information, and so on and so forth. On to slide 12. So once you have a specialty, if you go on to get a master's degree, right, all you're doing is deepening that specialty. You are expanding that one tiny area of knowledge. When you go get a master's or any type of graduate degree, you're not having to take a language, history, science, math. Right? You only take the courses that are relevant to your study. And so it's not a general education anymore. It's just about that one specialty. Slide 13, right? So you read when you get your master's or your PhD or your PsyD or whatever it is that is your terminal degree, right? You're reading all these research papers, and those take you to the edge of human knowledge. Slide 14, once you're on that boundary of human knowledge for that specific discipline, that specific topic, you focus. And you focus and you focus and you push that boundary for a few years. Next slide. And then finally, you create knowledge. And that dent, that tiny little, not even a pimple, right? That dent on slide 16 is what you would call a PhD or a study. One single study is that tiny dent. And you're like, oh wow, but you created knowledge. Great. Let's take it back. Let's scan back onto the overall human knowledge circle on slide 17. And that tiny little bubble, that tiny little dent that I have with an arrow that shows a PhD, that's one experiment. Okay? So when we interpret the meaning or significance of any one single experiment, we need to keep in mind its context within science as a whole. Okay? And so we can't generalize when we find an association between eating high processed meat diets and bowel cancer, that it means that bowel cancer is caused by processed meat, because that's not the case, okay? Okay, and really what it does is it ends up spreading, slide 18, pseudoscience and misinformation. So this is one of my favorite cartoons websites called PhD comics.com, and it's amazing. It's really funny. If you ever go to grad school for psychology, you will find that all the cartoons on that website really relate to you. Actually, in any science, it doesn't have to be in psychology, but there's lots of them that are related to psychology, and they're perfect. But this one's actually really sadly true, right? Where at the top of the science news cycle, right, you talk about your research, and you might say A is correlated with B, given C, assuming D, and only under E conditions, right? You make a claim that's very specific, and then that's translated by your university PR office, and your PR office may do a good job, but they might say, like, scientists find potential link between A and B. under certain conditions. So less specific, but they summarize it accurately. Then, by the time it's picked up by the newswire, especially if it causes some sort of, if it's quote-unquote sexy information, right? They'll twist it to all of a sudden A causes B, says science. If anyone ever says, science says blah, 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 no. There is no group of people that just sit around and we are science, right? Therefore, they cannot say anything. There's no one committee of science. But needless to say, then the internet grabs it and it says, instead of A causes B, it's scientists out to kill us again. A is going to kill you all of the time. And of course, when it goes on to the news media, both local and national, right? A causes B. A is a killer among us. And then, of course, somehow it manages to get through Facebook and to your mom, and your mom is then saying, you know, I'm wearing this tin hat in order to ward off the causes of B or causes of A, right? All of this spreads misinformation and is plain pseudoscience. It's fake science, and it causes the general population to not trust science, which is even worse. Okay, so let's have a science example from psychology. So slide 19. So there's this lovely headline that came out rather recently, I think it was last year. It says, science says, what did I say? Science says, Snapchat makes you happy. Okay? And so the article is right there. Please feel free to go and click on it and read it. You can pause me and come right back to it, because we will talk about what it is that it says. And so based on the article, I want you to just think about, what did the study test and what did the study find? Because those are two questions that I think that they really butchered, right? And so my students actually sent me this because they made me a Snapchat, because I don't know how to use Snapchat, because apparently I'm old now. Instagram is kind of like my ceiling, but I do have Snapchat. I just don't know what to do with it, nor do I know how to like check things or add things. But anyway, so my students were like, see, you should really use Snapchat, it'll make you happy. And of course, being a good professor that I am, I destroyed their argument completely, and I'm now using it in every psych class when I talk about research methods to demonstrate how the news media can butcher scientific findings. Okay, so read the article and come right back. Okay, so I'm on slide 20 when you come back. So science says Snapchat makes you happy. And so first, again, I looked up the actual journal article, and it's titled Sharing the Small Moments, Ephemeral Social Interaction on Snapchat. It's a communications study, and they essentially stated that Snapchat interactions are more enjoyable and associated with positive mood, but also associated with lower social support. Okay? And Snapchat was viewed as a lightweight channel for sharing spontaneous experiences with trusted ties, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure is like the point. That is like the mission statement for Snapchat. But does anyone in here think that this says Snapchat makes you happy? And if you do, let's go look at the actual results. So slide 21. So what did they actually study? They had 154 undergraduates at the University of Michigan, where the population was 67% female, 74% white, 23% were in Greek life, and 87% report that their parents had some form of a college degree. Okay. Now, just looking at this demographic, can we note any sampling issues that, not necessarily sampling issues for the study, but sampling issues for generalizability? The first thing you should think of is generalizability means that this is representative of the population, but definitely not, our population is definitely not 67% female or 74% white. So one would argue that this might be a very specific type of sample, and maybe only generalizable to that particular subsection of the population. So let's talk about the procedure. What did they do? They had a baseline questionnaire for mood, and they had 14 days of smart use survey where they essentially texted the person 6 times per day. Okay, so 6 times per day, the participants got these questions on the next slide. Slide 22. So they were asked 4 simple questions. How did your most recent social interaction occur? Was it face-to-face, phone call, text, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever? How pleasant or unpleasant was that interaction on a scale of 1 to 5? How supportive or unsupportive was the person that you interacted with on a scale of 1 to 5? And how close are you to that person on a scale of 1 to 5? All fine. Good methodology. Data was gathered from a total of 11,000 social interactions over the 14 days. Out of those 11,000 social interactions, only 204 were Snapchat interactions. Think about what might be a potential problem of talking about Snapchat in and of itself when the majority of those interactions across those 14 days were not on Snapchat, right? 204 out of 11,000 is a small percentage, okay? So that's a problem in and of itself. But moving on, so these are the results. I don't expect you to understand this too much, but we're going to break it down. So the figure shows, I'm on slide 23. On the left, social enjoyment. On the right, social supportiveness. And that black center line essentially shows Snapchat. Okay? And anything to the left of that line is less than Snapchat. Anything to the right of that line is more than Snapchat. So, and the gist of the results is Snapchat provides greater social enjoyment than email, texting, or calling. Who emails you? Me. Your professor, right? Your teachers. The school, probably asking you for money. Maybe stores telling you about their greatest sale, right? No one's enjoying reading emails. Emails are the worst. Texting, calling. Who calls you? Mom? Grandma? Right? Texting, maybe your friends, right? So Snapchat provides greater social enjoyment than email, texting, and calling, but is not more enjoyable than Instagram, Twitter, or face-to-face. On the right, you'll see the social supportiveness, and what this essentially shows is that everything but Instagram provides more social support than Snapchat. Everything, including Facebook, provides more social support. Moving on to slide 24, this is the same thing for emotional valence or emotional arousal, and essentially Snapchat is more positive than Facebook, probably because Facebook is pretty much all politics at this point, and arguing with your Uncle Bob about something. Email and text, so Snapchat is more positive than Facebook, email and text, but again, not more positive than Instagram, Twitter, and face-to-face. Thankfully, not face-to-face, right? So does anywhere in here show you that Snapchat makes you happy? In fact, Snapchat just more positive than Facebook, email, and texting, but not other forms of social media, right? And at no point did they test whether it makes you happy, just whether it's more positive or negative, whether those social interactions are positive and negative. Okay? So slide 25, the conclusion is Snapchat provided short-term boosts of positive emotion and is more enjoyable than Facebook, email, calls, and texting. And there's nothing wrong with this research. It's good work focused on an interesting and emerging topic of study within social media. But there's a huge problem with saying that Snapchat makes you happy. At no point did they test that, and at no point did the results of the journal article actually state that. Okay, so that's the problem. Okay, so I was going to do an activity where I have you read these 2 articles, but we're not going to do that. This is essentially your quote-unquote out. So your homework could be to find your own news article and its own corresponding journal article, where you have to go and find the journal article. Alternatively, I'm giving you these 2 for you to use as, if you want to use this for your homework instead. And so the news article is going to be from Vice, and it's Science Says, my favorite, Science Says regularly attending concerts makes you happier. And, the journal article is If You're Happy and You Know It, Music Engagement and Subjective Well-Being. Please note that there are 2 studies in the journal article. They more or less discuss the same thing, but you do have to summarize both, okay? And so on slide 27, this is the assignment, the questions that you need to answer for the news article, the research article, and then you're going to do a comparison where you're going to think critically about what mistakes or exaggerations, talk about whether they were using the same independent and dependent variables, and then you're going to rewrite the news article title to make it more scientifically accurate while still being short and concise. Okay? And so again, for your paper, you can find your own news article and then the corresponding journal articles and do this, or you can use the article that I posted on Canvas. Please note also that this is a question-answer format. Do not put it in paragraph form, meaning these are the questions, type out the answer right after it, okay? Please, it'll be much easier for grading, and this is not necessarily a paper, but rather just an assignment, okay? All right, so that's it for this week for the science in the news. If you have any questions, please let me know.